Good morning. It's Friday the 2nd of October and it's time for Boris's Best of British Bulletin. In Scots Tory news, unfortunately some Scottish uni students have become COVID-19 symptomatic and had to self-isolate. Scots Tory branch office supervisor Dross MP was quick to lay the blame for this travesty squarely at the door of the SNP. Last Friday he said in the Scottish Sun that this is a shambles and students deserve better. They shouldn't be left in limbo while the SNP fumble for an answer. It's just not right that one of their first weekends of university life will be spent wading through government guidance. He was less vocal 8 hours later when Manchester University locked down 1,700 students after some became symptomatic. A further outbreak also occurred in Exeter University and still Dross was silent. That's because Dross would have had to criticise the actual Tory leader to do that. Dross continued his SNP bad tirade on BBC Radio Scotland on Monday, where he tore into ScotGov for issuing the guidance they said they would, within the time frame they said they would, and said it just wasn't good enough. He was less aggressive when challenged with the fact that England has as yet offered no guidance to all the similarly affected students in English universities, and had just in fact held them hostage.
And I really think this guidance should have been absolutely crystal clear before these young people left home, and certainly before they got to university and were, in many cases, locked up in halls of horror. I was getting calls.
And of course, we've seen exactly the same thing happening in England, of course, and you describe what is happening in Scotland as a shambles. I presume you would say the same of the situation in England.
Well, let's see what happens in England. Obviously, there's the case.
What do you mean, let's see, wait and see? We already know what's happening. Students in Manchester at the Metropolitan University said they were being prevented from leaving by security guards and police. They were told if they leave, they can't come back. If it's a shambles in Scotland and the same situation pertains in England, you must describe that as a shambles too, surely.
I just said that, Gary, and if you look at what's happening in Manchester, what we've got to wait and see is what happens across the rest of the universities and colleges in England. But I hope, beyond anything else, that the UK government look at what has happened in Scotland and get the guidance out there before all the colleges and universities go back, and that guidance is crystal clear.
So provide the same clarity that the Scottish government has provided?
Well, the Scottish Government have provided that clarity 4 days later, having changed their decisions every day up until then.
But we haven't had that clarity from the UK government. Do they need to follow suit?
Well, they need to ensure everything's in place before all the colleges and universities go back. But I do want...
And like a dog with a bone, they just wouldn't quit. This popped up in the Scots Tory branch office Twitter feed. This was a photo of the notes in the windows of students in accommodation at Dundee University. But look closer. Yes, that window right there, giving Nicola Sturgeon the thumbs up and Boris Johnson the thumbs down, which appeared on the actual Scottish Tory branch office Twitter feed. You'd think after all that they would learn. Perhaps look at getting their own house in order before attacking ours? Well, no. Scottish Tory branch office attacks on ScotGov continued when Banff-and-Buchan lobby fodder David Duguid MP went on the BBC and criticised the Scottish Government for not doing something they are not empowered to do, and that Westminster has stopped doing. Yes, living up to his locally acquired nickname, David Duguid, he and his Scots Tory MPs demanded that ScotGov replicated the financial assistance given by the furlough scheme, just as the UK scheme is being wound up. His TV appearance didn't go well.
But when I ask you a question about this, you're talking about something different. The point is, the Scottish Conservatives now want something and are demanding something of the Scottish Government which the government of which you are a member is not prepared to do, which is to replicate the cash support of the furlough scheme for companies in particular sectors like hospitality or concert venues or whatever.
I'm not sure I see the distinction that you're looking for there, Gordon, because Douglas Ross made his point and asked the question of the Prime Minister on Wednesday at Prime Minister's Question Time, and then on the back of the statement by Rishi Sunak on Thursday, he showed his appreciation and accepted that was essentially what he was asking for.
I'm not suggesting for 1 second that Douglas Ross can't contradict himself.
Sadly, this oxygen thief is my MP. But I do feel some measure of sympathy for our Tory chums. I mean, it must be really annoying, an 80-seat majority and they can't lay a glove on our leader. In UK Tory news, the government job protection scheme, furlough, will finish at the end of the month, so millions of people face uncertain futures. But in a move that surprised no one, the government is going to give £350 million to a lady who is rich enough to be able to afford a gold-plated piano. As we covered last week, Baroness Dido fucking Harding's hideously expensive and malfunctioning contact tracing application was launched. Well, since then it has transpired that NHS Test and Trace application can't process test results from NHS laboratories. So people who began to isolate but then test negative can't release themselves from the isolation clock. And perhaps more seriously, people who test positive in an NHS lab can't notify their contacts through the application. You can be forgiven for being confused as to why NHS Test and Trace can't process data from the NHS. Well, that's because NHS Test and Trace actually has fuck all to do with the NHS. NHS Test and Trace is actually Serco, Deloitte, Cytel, Randox, Boots, Mighty, G4S, Sodexo, Amazon and TransUnion, all of which are large private outsourcing companies, most of which are Tory donors, and all under the astute direction of Baroness Dido fucking Harding. All the NHS does is hand over copious amounts of our money, and they're not getting very good value. Meanwhile, in Scotland, we launched a fully functional app for £12.3 million less than Baroness Dido fucking Harding, and are tracking and tracing over 90% using our actual NHS alongside local health authorities. And all of this without outsourcing to any political donors whatsoever. In June, Boris Johnson said to Black Lives Matter protesters, "I hear you," and acknowledged the incontrovertible and undeniable feeling of injustice that we simply cannot ignore. So almost too predictably, 40 Tory MPs have refused to take part in unconscious bias training. Meanwhile, the promise of 500,000 tests per day won't be reached because, in news that should shock nobody, the government failed to order enough raw materials. So the government stopped releasing evidence of how many are being tested, because if you don't look at a problem, it isn't real. Then the government said the reason the UK had the worst COVID response and the worst economy in Europe is because we are freedom-loving. And then the government freedom-lovingly banned schools from using any materials that criticise capitalism. Not content with this, they also banned schools discussing victim narratives, which is going to make it tough to maintain their national anti-bullying strategy. And then a leaked report said the government was planning to freedom-lovingly deploy the military on the streets. But there's no need to do that. There are already approximately 6,000 ex-servicemen on our streets. No, that's not right. Not living up to their label as the party of fiscal responsibility, it was revealed that the Tory government has wasted £3.9 billion since March. This includes unsafe testing kits, face masks that don't work, broken tracing systems, useless antibody tests, cancelled ventilator challenge and inexplicable contracts to sweet manufacturers and dormant companies with no employees to provide vital PPE that never arrived. Meanwhile, the government announced only 24% of businesses have done any preparation for Brexit, and only 30% of cross-channel HGVs have the correct paperwork. The government finally admitted what they've been told repeatedly since 2016 and said Brexit would cause 2-day queues of 7,000 lorries at channel ports. 7,000 lorries. An average of 16.5 metres each, that's 1,155 kilometres. Now that's a bit too European. That's a queue of over 700 miles long, every day. To solve this, the government announced a new internal border in Kent, helpfully relocating 700 miles of queues to London, Essex, Surrey and East Sussex instead. A month ago, Tory MP Sir Edward Lee was demanding that we take back Calais. Now we're essentially abandoning Kent. But we might not have a problem anyway, because it was revealed that there are just 2,000 EU haulage permits for our 40,000 UK hauliers. Just in case any government listeners are watching this and struggling with the maths, that's 5% of the amount we actually need. And despite being aware of this since 2016, we don't even have enough pallets for the goods we import, because we currently rely on a supply we share with the European Union, and have neither the wood, the treatment plants or the chemicals required to make and treat our own. So now the government has to make a 200-mile border, a mechanism for policing it, an internal passport system, software, administration, buy 38,000 permits and grow enough trees for 700,000 pallets, all in 3 months. This, of course, is the same government that had 5 months to add up some A-level results. And as we all remember, that went so well. An unnamed minister was quoted, "We are stuck in a bind. If we try to cancel Brexit, we destroy ourselves. If we go ahead with it, we destroy the country." It's lovely to see that this unnamed minister has chosen to destroy the country, rather than his ineffective and rotten party. How patriotic. The London School of Economics reported the long-term cost of Brexit will be 2 to 3 times the cost of COVID. So Rishi Sunak cancelled the budget, because once again, if you don't look at a problem, it doesn't exist. JP Morgan, who recently employed ex-Chancellor Sajid Javid MP, shifted £200 billion out of the UK into Germany, calling it a result of Brexit. At least 22% of our entire national economy depends on international banks based in the City of London. So when the largest one fucks off, it's not a great development. As an added mark of confidence, Sir Jim Ratcliffe, Britain's richest man and a leading Brexiteer, celebrated our hard-won independence from the EU by buggering off to Monaco, which is in the EU, with all his bloody money. Sir Jim had already expressed his opinion and confidence in UK manufacturing by announcing that his new 4x4 vehicle would not be assembled in the Ford plant in Bridgend. The exciting new Ineos Grenadier will now be built in the EU. The Bridgend Ford plant, which everyone hoped would be repurposed to build the Ineos Grenadier, will now close, with Ford engine production being moved to the EU, with the loss of 1,600 jobs. In 2016, the area voted heavily to leave the European Union. So, in chronological order, town votes to leave EU. Nation agrees. Largest employer decides to fuck off to the EU. But it's okay, a Brexiteer industrialist is going to take over. No, I'm not. I'm going to the EU with my money, my company, and any jobs I was going to give out. Bugger. Boris Johnson's old friend and backer, Charles Moore, who has spent his life demanding the end of the BBC and said the BBC causes human misery worthy of Dickens, is in line to run the BBC. It was also reported that ex-Daily Mail editor Paul Dacre, who shouts cunt so much at his meetings that they're called the vagina monologues, and whose paper is banned as a Wikipedia reference because it lies so often, is going to be put in charge of Ofcom, ensuring decent and honest broadcasting. Now, Boris Johnson has previously tweeted, "A free press is vital in holding the government to account," which is probably why the people holding his government to account are being replaced with his mates, his chequebook and his cheerleaders. And in a shock move that expected by no one at all, the government have finally decided it's time to come clean on its intent to fuck over the UK fishing industry. Having courted them for years to support Brexit and the Union, the government will now propose a 3-year tapered extension to the common fisheries policy in UK waters. So a deal will mean 3 years more of those pesky foreigners plundering our waters. No deal will mean our fish will spend 2 days in a queue of trucks in the new EU territory formerly known as Kent. In either case, Johnny Foreigner is going nowhere, as many EU vessels have bought British quota from British fishermen and will still be entitled to fish here, whatever happens. For a whole day, Davy PhD's indie vlog thought we'd discovered a loophole so that bars could remain open after the 10 PM curfew. All you needed to do was say it's a workplace canteen. And how did I discover that little gem? Well, by looking at the Houses of Parliament in London. Yes, and a stunning bit of do as we say and not as we do. On Monday it was revealed that Boris Johnson and chums could keep drinking long into the night, while giving the proletariat who have to drink in normal pubs a massive middle finger salute, as the norms have to drink up at 10 PM and fuck off home. Yes, our glorious leaders have no less than 30 venues across the parliamentary estate in which they can enjoy a pint, all in the past allegedly be felt up by Ross Thompson. Thankfully for poor Boris, who's so skint these days, they all operate at subsidised prices. Yes, folks, in Tory Britain we are subsidising our politicians' drinking habits. How wonderfully British. When pressed for comment on the issue, Boris said this.
I'm terrible like that, lazy things in your brain. Casuals essentially live a like this, and the women there are absolutely sex mad. I suppose that I managed to drain the wound into a tin cup. In this one, they should do that before they bit it. I was quite unsaid, was it pierced labia? I said, by jingo, I realised I'd married 3 of them. Yeah. Hilarious, thought they either, because then they made me their chief. Oh, well, I mean, obviously, relationships where we go like that. I mean, the witch doctor never liked me. He was forever burying his brother. But now, it is quite nice of some time. I realised I'd made a terrible faux pas in their culture. I bluffed my way out. They chased me for several weeks. Like this, nice. Very surprising that they didn't catch me because I was absolutely smashed like poisonous frogs.
In a crushing blow to our hard-working MPs, later that day it was announced that Parliamentary Bars would stop serving alcohol at 10 p.m. So, loophole closed. Sorry. And finally, if you feel all alone and despairing at this, you're not. Belief in Britain as a global force for good has fallen 10% since 2019. Now, I, for one, am shocked to the core that the belief actually still exists at all. Now, this all might sound like well, I don't have a snappy analogy this week. This sounds more bizarre than all the things I've compared it to in the recent past. Things like episodes of The Twilight Zone, The X-Files, Fawlty Towers, or Monty Python sketches. But it also sounds just like last week and a week before. And therein lies the problem. Because this is normal now. But this is just 1 week. Just one more painfully crappy, but also painfully normal week in Tory Britain. Which leaves me with just one question. Is it too late to turn to God? Or drink? Or both? Folks, thanks for watching. Have a look at the Facebook page. Feel free to comment, share a video, share it with a unionist. It's meant for them too. And be nice if some of them venture on here to comment. Love you all. See you on Monday. David PhD.